Installation of login and permissions of NAV Easy Security is quite a simple process. We will need to import the objects. We will export all the source code from the current database. We create a new company, run the complete install, and then import the additional data in here. We also do a first publish, so we're sure everything is working fine, and then we're going to do a recording only setup for other companies. We also add the template to the SQL profiler and set up an additional service tier for recording purposes. In this version we have downloaded the latest version of Easy Security. I'm going to extract it here and take a look at the files that are inside the folder in here. We have some conversion tools. For each executable version of NAV we have files. We have a file with the major part of the application, and then we have a few objects that you only want to import the first time. They are for the field level security. If you have a conflict with the menu suite we are using, you can actually import additional menu suites from this folder in here. But the first thing I want to do is open up my designer and import the new objects in here. And this one is a 2015, so I'm going to import my two FOB files in here. The only objects you would ever have a problem with is the menu suite in here, because there's only 10 available. There's potentially a conflict, and you can skip that one and then import from the other file if necessary in here. So the objects imported. I also want to import the second one, and it's only 4 code units. They are actually being used by the field level security. Those ones should never be replaced. They start containing data that is actually needed for the installation. You typically want to go and compile all the objects, and all the objects we have starts with ES. So I will select to compile all those ones in here. The menu suites would need to be compiled also. If you don't compile all the menu suites, sometimes it won't build the proper menu suite for you inside the NAV client. We would need a text file of all the source code, and we use that for many different things. So I want to export this one to a text format in here. But since I'm currently using a license that is not allowed to do that, it's typically something that an NAV partner license is actually used for in here. So as I switch to a partner license, I can now select all the objects and export them to my text file in here. Can be that objects are maybe not licensed, and we actually have a function where we can mark the objects necessary in here from our application. As this file exporting, I will go to the NAV client, and we want to keep all the Easy Security data in a separate company. So the first thing I want to do here is actually to go create a new company. The reason we always want to have a new company in here is that if something goes wrong when we actually run our initialization wizard, we can always just delete the company and do it again. We can also in the future time actually redo it if we want to clean it up for some reason, or we can with a very simple way secure the data, so only people that can actually see the company can actually change the security data. So that's the main reasons for it. You don't want to put this one even when a single company inside the normal accounting data, because there's no way of easily rolling back or redoing anything when you're in your main accounting company. If I go to my department and I compiled my objects and I have a license for Easy Security, I should be able to see the logins and permissions and field level and data security in here. To launch our installation wizard, I want to go to the security setup, and as I do that, it comes up with the wizard. If you happens to click cancel on that one, it will actually open up the regular security setup. And if I close it and open it again, it won't come back in there. But you can always click on this one and run the setup Easy Security will relaunch the wizard up here. The only thing I would need to do is actually select the source file. There's one thing about the location for this source file. Right now it's on my temp drive, on the C drive in here. And my service tier is actually running on the same computer, so I can actually see that file. Typically, you want to put this file in a location that is a network share, where the service account that runs the service tier can actually see that one. So you typically want to have something that's the / server name and then a folder and the file name there. Since all is locally installed here, I can actually select the local file, but normally you have to select a file on a network share. So as I initialize complete setup, it creates two profiles. It will create a restore point and initial snapshots of the security in the database, and then it will start copying that into Easy Security. And it will then start scanning the source code in here. The scan of the source code is finding all table relation and all the other things in the customer's database that both will help improve the permissions that we deliver, but also as you record, we'll be able to do all the extra permissions that are needed in there. As it's finishing the source code analysis in here, if there's certain objects you can't export, it's not a big problem. You can leave out a few of them. You just have to be a little more careful with your recordings if you don't have the source code analyzer in there, knowing all the relationships. So the setup completed in around 2.5 minutes in here. And if I now go take a look at it, I'll see that my permission sets that was in the system has been copied in here. My logins, and I currently only had one in here, was copied in here. The one thing we want to do after this, we want to import the permission sets that we deliver, and they are in the same folder as the normal files, and we have the permission set and we have the groups in here. So I want to open up my segregation of duty permission sets. This one is quite a lot of records actually, where you normally in NAV have 8,000-9,000 records in the security setup. We're adding around 25,000 or more actually with these permissions, much more precise for all the segregation of duty in here. So the permission set finished importing in here. We also have some permission groups, and it's the same way they delivered in the folder. We both have a couple of permission groups for quick security, one for data access reading and super access, and then we have for the segregation of duty, we have some sample permission groups matching the spreadsheet that is also delivered in the installation folder. So basically we have now imported all of it. After the initial install, we clean up the data, but sometimes there's some leftover records that can cause a problem. So as we finish the install, we want to test publish the first time. And what that will do, it will actually write back the same permissions that was in NAV, plus all the extra permission sets we have imported in here. It will also do all the calculation and basically ensure the whole system is working properly in here. Since the first publish contain around 40,000 more records or so, it writes all these additional records, and it takes some time because the changelog is active. But as soon as the initial publish is done, future publish are only going to make the few changes to the data and runs a lot faster in here. The permission have now been successfully published, and I didn't have any issues with it. Sometimes a little cleanup is necessary of old records, and you can, under the details, typically find those records that needs to be cleaned up in there. That finished the part inside NAV in here. Now have all the data inside Easy Security. I copied all the existing security, and I can now start working on it. To be able to actually record permissions, we want to use the SQL profiler. And I already installed the SQL profiler, but if you install SQL 2014 Express, it actually contains the SQL profiler in here. You don't need the full version of SQL as I have it here right now, but you can only do the Express version with 2014. You don't need to use 2014 for your production databases. You can actually just use 2014 profiler. I want to go here and import a template, and in our installation folder we have a SQL profiler, and depending on the version of SQL you're using, in my case I'm using 2012 in here, I want to import the templates. Without the proper template in here, I would actually not be able to capture the right permissions. Typically, you have to select this one, check that you want to use it as a default, and then go save the template in here. So when I now do a new trace, I select the database. I can select the right events in here, and I will then do a column filter for the database name. If many users are connected to a database name, I want to be able to see only a single user, and that's where you could filter on the login, but the login in the database is not the login to NAV in here. So I want to add an additional service tier that runs as a different service account, and then I can filter on that one. It also means that as I restart my service tier, I won't have to kick out all the people off the other one. So first thing I want to do is actually go and create a new account to run this service tier. You would normally do this in an Active Directory. Since I'm running in a complete standalone environment in here, I'm actually going to add a new user, and I'm going to call it NAV Recording. I'll just add a password down here, and I will say the password never expires, because else it works fine for a while and suddenly one day the password expires in here. So I now have my new NAV Recording user in here. I will bring up my NAV administration tool, and in my setup I actually have multiple service tiers in here, but I'm going to add another one for 2015 or 8.0 down here. I can see currently I'm using the standard ports, but I would of course also need a couple of ports to doing this one. So I add an instance, and I will just call this one NAV Recording. I will use the port numbers I have, just with 10 hires in here. And instead of the network service, I'll actually select my account, and I'll use my NAV Recording and put in my domain, that's my computer name, and my password, and click OK down here. So I now have my NAV Recording. It's inherited the database name, and in my case it was the same in here. So at that time I'm now ready with my service tier. My service tier still will not connect to the database, because I also need to give the user access, the NAV Recording user access to the database. So I connect to my SQL server, go to my users in here, add a new user. It will be a Windows login. Do a lookup, and I can just type NAV recording. And I'm going to give it the same name in SQL. And then say it's a DB owner in here. That should be enough to actually run the service tier in here. So I'm now ready. I should be able to start my service tier. And in my Windows client, I can now select my new server. So I'll go in, it was 56, and it was NAV recording in here. I now have my two companies, and if I select the first one in here, the Kronos International, I can now restart the service tier, and only this user is now going to be affected, and I'm also only going to capture permissions for this user in here. So if I go back, now I'm running, I'm logged in, I want to go to my SQL profiler, and in my database name, it called something with 8-0 and percentage sign as a wildcards. In the login name, I want to capture anything that has recording in the name. And then go ahead and run this trace in here. And as I see it now, I'll only have transaction from this one service tier. I can have 20 users on the other service tier, but I'm only capturing data from this one login and from this one database in here. So I'll be able to capture myself, for example, going to change a customer in here. So I just changed the customer. I will go here and stop and save this one as a trace XML file. This one is now a complete standalone setup in here. I have SQL Server, I have service tier, I have everything installed on this computer. If you're looking at securing your system, you probably don't want people that are more kind of application people to actually going in and restarting service tier. If they by accident hit the wrong one, you kick 50 users out of the system. So you can actually make, like in this case is a Windows 8.1 install, complete install of NAV in here, including the service tier. You can then go change the database to actually be the production database that is on a different computer, and then allow the user to have the alter trace permission in SQL, and they will be able to do everything here running their own local service tier, not all the other ones. They'll be able to restart it. They'll be able to use the profiler and everything from this one standalone computer. A lot of times it's created virtually. You don't need to have any access to admin accounts or anything like that. If you do it this way, the user just needs to be a local admin on this computer to restart the service tier in here. But that's basically conclude the installation of the logins and permissions part of Easy Security. I added the service tier, I added the template, and I ran the installation wizard inside our application. There's one thing left in here you can do, and that's actually for the launch feature we have for recording. If I go into security setup in my Kronos International, the other option in here is actually to initialize a recording only setup. And if you do that, all you have to do is select a company where Easy Security is installed in. Click on the install, and you're basically done with it now. Now you can go here and use the launch feature. It will read the data from the Easy Security company. And I will be able to launch the objects using the source code analysis that is also in the Easy Security company, especially for re-recording the service or the role centers. Would that be a very, very useful function in here?